March 20th, 1995, Tokyo. The clock reads 7:55 a.m. The subway is packed, people are rushing to work. In one of the cars, an ordinary-looking man who doesn't stand out at all places several newspaper-wrapped packages on the floor, punctures them with the sharp tip of his umbrella, and steps off at the first stop. Suddenly, it becomes hard to breathe. You know that sharp feeling, like if I just take one more breath, my insides might spill out? In 5 other cars, the exact same thing is happening. People feel nauseous and struggling to breathe. One passenger throws a suspicious package out of the train, but by then, it's too late to make a difference. Coughing, vomiting, mucus streaming from noses and eyes, people stumble out of the cars, unable to understand what's happening. Emergency lines are overwhelmed with calls. People are passing out everywhere. There's some kind of gas in the subway. Get here now. Dispatchers send ambulances racing towards the subway. The first theories, a gas line explosion or a fire. It's hard to tell. Reports are pouring in simultaneously from different parts of the Tokyo subway system. I could breathe in, but I couldn't breathe out. And then I see, on the other side of the car near the doors, something lying there wrapped in wet newspaper. That's how we wrap fish. I remember thinking, how do you even lose a fish on the subway? Passengers who aren't as severely affected try to escape the underground. Subway employees stay at their posts and are exposed to themselves. Meanwhile, the police are scrambling to figure out what's actually going on. All units, we're initiating Plan G. There's been a guerrilla-style attack using explosives at a subway station. Hey, people are losing consciousness. Looks like gas. We're getting reports of vision loss. Around 11 a.m., the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department holds an emergency press conference. They announce that the victims were most likely poisoned with sarin, a nerve agent originally developed by the Nazis before World War II. And how did sarin end up in Japan? And who released it on a subway? Police begin connecting it to strange incidents from the previous months. Poisonings, chemical leaks, kidnappings. Every thread leads to a religious cult, Aum Shinrikyo. Its leader frequently appears on Japanese television and even shows up as a character in anime and manga. At first glance, nothing overtly criminal, nothing that raises immediate alarms. But when police begin hunting down the cult's members, they discover something unexpected. Japan's elite. Scientists, military personnel, graduates of the country's most prestigious universities, all counted amongst their ranks. All of them were preparing for nuclear war. At the same time, manufacturing drugs, chemicals, and biological weapons, assembling assault rifles and machine guns, and even purchasing a helicopter. From that helicopter, the cult planned to disperse 70 tons of sarin over Tokyo. If that plan had succeeded, millions could have died. And today, you're going to understand exactly why they were ready to do it. I'm about to tell you the story of the most dangerous cult in Japan, as if it all happened yesterday. Every person sees the world in their own way. The man who carried out the terrorist attack in the Tokyo subway saw it like this. He was a cult leader, Chizuo Matsumoto, and he was born with congenital glaucoma. Matsumoto was born in 1955, the 7th of 9 children. Money was always tight in the family. To them, he was just another mouth to feed, one who would never be able to earn. So, he was sent away to a free boarding school for the blind. For 13 years, he didn't receive so much as a single postcard from his parents. The boy was simply abandoned, left to figure out the world on his own. And somewhere along the way, that loneliness hardened into something else. Matsumoto decided he would become a god to his completely blind classmates. Try covering your left eye for a moment. He couldn't see anything out of his left eye, but his right eye had about 30% vision. And he used it. He manipulated other students, blackmailed them, forced them to buy food from him, food he had stolen himself. It wasn't just better vision that gave him an advantage. He was physically stronger too, bigger and tougher than most of the others from birth. On top of that, Matsumoto trained in judo and even earned a black belt. Within a few years, he turned the school into his personal kingdom. In the mid-1970s, Matsumoto graduated from the school for the blind. He stepped into a new life, working at his brother's shop, which sold medicinal herbs. But here, no one saw him as a god, and he couldn't accept that. One day, over something trivial, Matsumoto brutally attacked a former employee, cracking his skull. The case went to court, he was fined $150 and fired. After losing his job, he tried 3 times to get into the University of Tokyo. 3 times, he failed. But Tokyo brought something else into his life. He met a woman named Tomoko, and soon they were married. Tomoko's parents gave the young couple some money. With it, they opened an acupuncture clinic. At first, business was good. Matsumoto expanded, opening a pharmacy that specialized in alternative medicine. There, he sold various Chinese herbs and powdered remedies with ingredients that honestly are better left unexamined. Then one day, the police walked into the pharmacy. A woman had complained that after taking one of his so-called miracle cures, she didn't leave the bathroom for days. That complaint triggered an investigation. Officers discovered that Matsumoto had been selling products without a license. The constipation remedy that sparked the case turned out to be a laxative several times stronger than the legal limit. He was fined again, this time $2,500. The pharmacy collapsed. Once again, everything he had built was gone. Now he needed a new way to make money. And Matsumoto decided he would make money from religion. Japan doesn't have a single dominant religion like Islam or Christianity. And after World War II and the atomic bombings, it was as if the country had lost a part of itself. In that vacuum, all kinds of cults found fertile ground. Matsumoto falls under the influence of one of them, Aum Shinrikyo. The group studies Tibetan Buddhism, practices meditation, and teaches yoga, but the leader doesn't give Matsumoto the attention he craves, and he wants to become, at the very least, the guru's right-hand man. Members of Aum Shinrikyo pour huge amounts of money into the group and blindly obey their leader. Matsumoto wants that same power, that same control. So, in 1984, he rents a small space in Tokyo and hangs a sign at the entrance, Aum Divine Wizards Club. It's not a cult yet, more like a small circle for yoga enthusiasts. Then Matsumoto cuts all ties with his past and changes his name. From now on, he is Shoko Asahara. To draw people in, Asahara makes the first classes free. There he tells students he has supernatural abilities, and he can teach them how to unlock those powers too. For example, he claims he can teach them to levitate. In 1985, magazines even publish a photo with the caption, "Every day I rise 1 millimeter higher." But to us, Asahara looks less like a man about to take flight and more like someone seriously constipated. Of course, he wasn't flying, even though the photo is real. Some yogis can actually pull off a trick like this. The key is catching the exact split second when both feet leave the ground. One publicity stunt isn't enough to build a movement, so Asahara doubles down on crafting his image, polishing his charisma, and presenting himself as a calm, enlightened master. Here, he once again turns glaucoma to his advantage. His partial blindness adds an aura of mystery to his persona. With money from his first followers, Asahara is able to travel to Tibet. On one of those trips, he meets the leader of Tibetan Buddhism, the 14th Dalai Lama. Back in Japan, Asahara uses photos with him to boost his credibility and popularity. Meanwhile, the Dalai Lama would probably barely remember taking a picture with some unusual Japanese visitor. After returning from Tibet, Asahara tells his students he can see auras, predict the future, and heal illnesses with a single touch. At the same time, his organization changes its name. Instead of the Divine Wizards, it becomes the Teaching of Supreme Truth. In Japanese, Aum Shinrikyo. Now it looks much more like a full-fledged cult. Asahara secures official registration as a religious organization. At the time, Japanese law strictly limited government interference in religious affairs. That status meant no taxes and the freedom to run businesses under religious protection. In other words, the system was now working in his favor. The cult was gaining momentum, and to attract even more followers, Asahara began throwing everything he can into the mix. He's simultaneously Buddha and Jesus Christ. He claims he was sent to Earth by the Hindu god of destruction, Shiva, to build a perfect world, Shambhala. His followers believe that in past lives, their leader helped build the Egyptian pyramids. And if that still doesn't blow your mind, Asahara throws in the prophecies of Nostradamus, the ideas of American sci-fi writer Isaac Asimov, and even anime series like Space Battleship Yamato into his teachings. Asahara presents himself as a preacher who wants to save the planet. He describes the future filled with environmental disasters, wars, famine, and epidemics. And as always, he blames it all on the Jews, the Freemasons, and the British monarchy. In the end, he says, it all leads to nuclear war, one that will wipe out most of humanity. But the followers of Aum Shinrikyo will survive the chaos. They'll rebuild the lost civilizations so they have nothing to fear. On the contrary, they're supposed to help bring about the end of the world. Because most people aren't in the cult, which means they're sinners. And the longer the apocalypse is delayed, the more time they have to keep sinning. The cult members saw themselves as the planet's saviors, accelerating the end of the world for the sake of humanity. You'd think, come on, who's actually going to believe this? But that's the scary part. People did. Members of Aum Shinrikyo didn't just believe Asahara. They drank tea brewed from his bathwater, and they did it voluntarily. They even paid $2,000 for it. For the truly wealthy, there was an even more exclusive option. Pay $8,000 and receive a small vial of Asahara's blood. You were supposed to drink it because a university in Kyoto had supposedly confirmed the healing powers of his DNA. Of course, no one had actually confirmed anything. And that wasn't all. For that price, you also got a special helmet that promised a mental connection with Asahara. And if that was just too expensive, you could pay just $300 and the cult leader would personally run his finger across your forehead. Like any cult, Aum Shinrikyo required monthly donations, sold merch, and charged for consultations. Exactly how much Asahara made is unknown. Let's just say it was a lot. He drove expensive cars and owned a $500,000 yacht. When the money started pouring in, Asahara gained weight, even though he preached modesty in eating. He explained his size by saying his fat was actually the negative karma of his disciples, karma he was absorbing to save them. So really, they should be thanking him. Most of Asahara's followers were young people from wealthy families. With their parents' money, they could afford to sip beard tea. This was Japanese youth born from 1955 and 65. Their formative years fell during the flashy, in every sense, 1980s. By then, Japan had already experienced its economic miracle. Japanese products were conquering the world, companies were booming, and banks were handing out loans at tiny interest rates. Young Japanese men and women were riding high. They had no idea the bubble was about to burst and everything would come crashing down. So, they spent freely on everything, including cults. Many young people felt suffocated by Japanese society, by the pressure, the expectations, the rigid rules, the lifetime job track. They wanted to feel special, to break out of the boring routine. Asahara tapped directly into that desire. He offered exactly what they were searching for, a sense of grand purpose. Suddenly, you're not just a rich, depressed kid, you're a warrior preparing to save humanity. And it wasn't just lost teenagers. Ambitious, well-educated people joined too: doctors, engineers, programmers, physicists. Many first attended the free introductory seminars out of simple curiosity. And instead of devil-worshipping fanatics, they saw attractive, articulate people saying all the right things. It felt like a normal interest club. Meditation sessions, book discussions, vegetarian lunches. Asahara appeared on Japanese television. He even had a studio producing anime about him. Everyone knew the name. In Aum Shinrikyo, no one ever forced you to quit your job or hand over everything overnight. It was gradual, subtle. At some point, you chose to stay on your own, and once you were all the way in, that's when the real hell began. A damp pit, 2 meters deep. It's freezing. A locked hatch overhead. No way to tell how much time has passed. The crash from whatever they gave you is starting to hit. Headphones pressed against your ears, and for hours, Asahara's mantra loops on repeat. Asahara Shokoです. It looks like punishment, but it isn't. This is an initiation ritual into the cult. In certain branches of Buddhism, harsh methods like these were used to cleanse karma, especially for beginners. Beatings, exorcisms, psychological pressure. In Aum Shinrikyo, one of the first victims of the so-called cleansing was Asahara's own wife, Tomoko. She wasn't interested in her husband's sect. He brought money home, provided for the kids. That was enough for her. But one day, Asahara decided that she had to go through the initiation ritual. Tomoko refused, so he ordered that she be struck 50 times with a cane, then locked in a dark room for a month. After that, Tomoko broke. Later, she would thank Asahara for making her do what was good for her. And there were thousands like Tomoko. Women who made up about 60% of Aum Shinrikyo had a special initiation, non-contact sex with Asahara. And if he decided they needed deeper purification, it became contact sex. On top of all that, full members were regularly pumped with different substances, shocked with electricity, and then flooded with pseudo-spiritual doctrine designed to reshape their thinking. Meanwhile, Asahara kept searching for new recruits. He gave lectures at university, trying to fuse his religion with science. He wanted the brightest students, the top minds. Their skills were valuable for expanding the cult's businesses, and there were plenty of those. Computer repair and sales, real estate, a printing house, an animation studio, restaurants, food delivery. The employees were cult members. Instead of salaries, modest meals. According to Asahara's teachings, unpaid labor was a blessing. Now, think about that for a second. How much money can a business make if it pays neither taxes nor wages? They worked 12-hour shifts. Another 6 or 7 hours went to prayers and sect duties. That left maybe 5 hours total for eating and sleeping. People were completely drained, and in that state, they were easy to control. With money from these businesses, Asahara opened offices across Japan, then in the United States, in Europe, and in several other Asian countries. By 1990, Aum Shinrikyo had around 10,000 members. The cult's capital, adjusted to today's money, ranged from $700,000 to $1.3 million. Asahara really was a capable businessman. A spiritual teacher or yogi, not so much. He forced followers to meditate in ice-cold water, in scalding water, and even sometimes underwater. That kind of strain required serious conditioning, but Asahara didn't care, and sooner or later, that recklessness caught up with him. A young disciple, Majima, meditated for hours in total darkness. Suddenly, he began to feel unwell. He screamed, then he struggled for breath. Asahara couldn't think of anything better than plunging Majima's head into a pool to cool him down. He didn't survive. What was it? A heart attack, exhaustion, or drowning? It no longer matters. What matters is that someone died inside the cult, and the timing couldn't have been worse. It happened just a few months before Aum Shinrikyo was preparing to apply for official status as a registered religious organization. A scandal right now would have destroyed everything. So, Asahara orders his disciples to cremate Mashima's body and scatter the ashes over a lake. To keep the other sect members from getting suspicious, Asahara invents a new doctrine called Poa. The idea was simple. If a person accumulates bad karma, they move closer to hell. In that case, they must be saved, or as the cult phrased it, spiritually transformed. In plain language, killed. Just like that, followers are given permission to murder corrupted people, supposedly to stop their spiritual decline and help them achieve a better rebirth. Majima had a friend who witnessed everything. He was terrified and decided he wanted out. Rumors of that reached Asahara almost immediately. Aum Shinrikyo operated an internal reporting system that would have impressed even the KGB. Asahara gathers his most devoted disciples, explains the situation, and orders a poa to eliminate the witness. It happens quickly. The young man is killed and burned. Now the cult isn't bound together only by belief, but by blood. Majima's parents and the friend's parents realize their sons have disappeared. They want answers, so they turn to Tsutsumi Sakamoto. He is a well-known attorney who represents people harmed by questionable religious groups. Tsutsumi begins preparing a class action lawsuit against Aum Shinrikyo. At the same time, he appears on television and directly criticizes Asahara. In October 1989, the television network TBS records an interview with the lawyer. Before it airs, the cult finds out and begins pressuring the network to cancel the broadcast, and it works. The interview is never shown. But Asahara understands something. The lawyer won't stop. he will keep collecting evidence. He will file the lawsuit. He will draw police attention. And from Asahara's perspective, that makes him a threat that has to be removed, which means there will be another Poa. 1 year after the lawyer's murder, Asahara enters politics. He forms a political party and runs for Japan's parliament. But Japanese voters are not impressed by the cult's campaign. Crowds of followers wearing Asahara masks, campaign rallies that feel more like a circus than a serious political movement. Few people are willing to vote for a man who promises not economic reform or stability, but the apocalypse. The cult's party suffers a devastating defeat, and that crushing loss reveals the worst sides of Asahara to the public. Look at this. Asahara appears on television, but most viewers see him as a bizarre fringe figure, not a divine leader, and he takes that personally. If the Japanese people refuse to believe in the end of the world, Asahara decides, then Aum Shinrikyo will make them experience it. After his crushing defeat in the election, Asahara becomes even more convinced that he is Jesus. Just like Christ, he believes he's misunderstood, rejected. If the world refuses to accept him, then the world must be doomed. And if it's doomed, it has to be destroyed. Asahara decides to start with Japan. In the early 90s, he travels to Moscow. The Soviet Union has just collapsed. Russia is spiraling. Poverty, chaos, alcoholism everywhere. The perfect breeding ground for a cult. Asahara promises Russian politicians major investments. In return, he's given airtime and a platform to promote his sect. He meets with influential politicians and spends money freely. Advertising campaigns, offices, even a joint university project. Within a few years, 50,000 Russians join Aum Shinrikyo, 2 to 3 times more than in Japan. But Asahara isn't truly interested in the Russian people. He wants their technology. After losing the election, the cult begins actively searching for weapons to destroy Japan. Dozens of scientist followers obsess over one question. What would be the most effective way to do it? First, they choose botulinum toxin, the same substance used today in Botox. In tiny doses, it's used cosmetically. In large amounts, it paralyzes the nervous system. Inside their laboratories, cult members produce thousands of liters of it. They test it on 3,000 mice, and every single one survives. Clearly something goes wrong. But instead of stopping, Asahara orders them to test the toxin on humans anyway. They load the crude solution onto 3 trucks. The plan? Spray botulinum toxin near US military bases in Japan, the airport, the Japanese parliament, and the imperial palace. The cult's top leaders are relocated to a remote island for the duration of the attack. Everything is set. The truck dispenses the toxin, and nothing happens. After that failure, the cult builds an entire chemical complex to manufacture phosgene, chlorine, and other poisonous gases. Local residents notice a strange smell coming from the facility and alert the police. An investigation begins. Several cult members are arrested, but at the last moment, they manage to destroy the evidence. There are more failed attempts to create biological weapons. The cult's chief biologist, Seiichi Endo, tries to extract aggressive bacteria from a livestock vaccine. Other members even travel to Africa searching for the Ebola virus. Meanwhile, Asahara is reading about the inventions of Nikola Tesla. Rumors claim that Tesla developed a laser weapon and even a machine capable of triggering earthquakes. Asahara desperately wants something like that, something spectacular. But his young scientist followers keep disappointing him. They lack the expertise, the practical experience, and time is running out. Only they didn't have to invent everything from scratch. If only they could buy ready-made weapons. That's when Asahara remembers Russia. His people had toured factories producing Kalashnikov rifles and RPGs. The Japanese visitors even ask whether there might be an old tank sitting around in storage for sale. There's no tank, but through Azerbaijan, the Russians sell the cult an Mi-17 helicopter. On top of that, Aum Shinrikyo purchases rifles and RPGs in Russia, weapons meant to seize power after the apocalypse. For that scenario, the cult even prepares its own government, a minister of defense, a minister of health, a minister of culture, and so on. But to trigger the end of the world, they need something far more powerful. nuclear. So Asahara begins searching in Russia and North Korea for people who can teach him how to build such a weapon. The cult also needs uranium. They fly to Australia to look for it. In 1993, Aum Shinrikyo buys a sheep ranch out there and obtains permission to conduct mineral exploration. In the end, the idea turns out to be far more expensive than Asahara even imagined, and there are no lunatics willing to sell him the secrets of nuclear weapons. But that doesn't mean he leaves empty-handed. In Russia, he manages to obtain something else, the technology to produce sarin. It's a colorless, clear liquid with no smell and no taste. When sarin comes into contact with air, it quickly evaporates and becomes a gas. The cult's chemical experiments are run by Masami Tsuchiya, a young scientist genuinely happy that the cult has given him a fully equipped laboratory. In that lab, Tsuchiya produces gunpowder and various substances, some for religious rituals, others for sale. Even the Japanese mafia, the Yakuza, buys chemicals from Asahara. Before long, Tsuchiya creates an entire chemical zoo. LSD, methamphetamines, barbiturates, mescaline, and many other drugs. Tsuchiya works quietly and methodically until he receives a special assignment: produce sarin. By June 1993, he's transferred to a small synthetic chemistry lab. In his first month there, he manages to produce the first few grams of sarin. The substance is tested on sheep at the same Australian ranch, and it kills dozens of animals almost instantly. The cult leadership is ecstatic. At last, they have a weapon of mass destruction. The only problem, there isn't much of it. Tsuchiya is ordered to produce 70 tons of sarin. 70 tons. If all of that were dispersed over Tokyo, roughly 4 million people could die. 70 tons is an enormous amount, so the cult builds an entire chemical plant for production, Satyan 7. Aum Shinrikyo spends $30 million on it, and in the first month of production, Tsuchiya can't even produce 10 liters of pure sarin. It's incredibly complicated. Still, it's better than nothing. So, in November 1993, the cult uses sarin against people for the first time. More precisely, they target Daiseku Ukaida, the leader of another religious organization. The first attempt fails, but a month later, Asahara tries again. This time, the cult members use a specially equipped truck fit with a dispersal system, but because of technical problems, the truck catches fire. One of the members accidentally poisons himself with sarin and barely survives. If it was some kind of divine warning, Asahara didn't see it that way. Instead, Aum Shinrikyo keeps going, sinking deeper and deeper into crime. Asahara begins to change. He grows more aggressive and frequently beats his disciples. In the 1990s, his health deteriorates. He develops diabetes, hemorrhoids, and his eyesight declines even further. His prophecies fail to come true. The cult has few real victories while its problems and its enemies continue to multiply. Because of legal restrictions, Japanese police don't move against the cult, and Asahara becomes bolder. In Hiroshima, cult members brazenly infiltrate the Mitsubishi plant, trying to obtain tank and artillery blueprints. They wiretap the headquarters of other religious organizations. They also compile lists of future targets, journalists, lawyers, even cartoonists. On June 27, 1994, in the city of Matsumoto, the cult uses sarin again. This time, the target is a group of judges handling a civil case against Aum Shinrikyo. The cult members park near the judges' homes and release the sarin at night. The wind carries it into neighboring houses. 7 people die. More than 200 people end up in the hospital. And still, no one realizes it was a terrorist attack. It's believed the whole thing started with some kind of toxic chemical exposure. Investigators have no idea what they're looking for. No explosives, no obvious signs of a crime, and most importantly, the judges weren't harmed, so no one even considers the cult. Instead, the blame falls on Yoshiyuki Kono, a local resident who kept pesticides and various chemicals at home for pottery and photo processing. Authorities claim he must have accidentally mixed chemicals. The fumes spread and poisoned the neighborhood. The worst part, Yoshiyuki's wife was poisoned too. She was left paralyzed and bedridden for the rest of her life. By 1995, cult members had already kidnapped activists dozens of times and sprayed chemicals in crowded places. Not every attack succeeded, and not every member was comfortable with what was happening. What Asahara didn't expect was this. Some of them started to run. In February of 95, in broad daylight, cult members abduct 69-year-old Kiyoshi Kariya. His sister was one of those who had escaped the cult, and Asahara wanted to know where she was. They interrogated him. During the questioning, he dies, and to destroy the evidence, they burn his body. But Kariya had thought ahead. Before he disappeared, cult members had called him, demanding that he hand over his sister, so just in case, he left a note at home. If I go missing, I was abducted by members of Aum Shinrikyo. By March of 95, complaints about the cult were piling up. Near the scene of yet another crime, police found fingerprints on a car belonging to one of the sect members, and around the cult's compounds, locals were reporting strange chemical smells more and more often, and talking about people walking around in gas masks. The final straw came when traces of sarin were discovered near the cult's headquarters. Asahara denied everything, claiming someone was trying to frame him, but this time, the pressure was real. In several locations, cult members began destroying equipment, documents, and leftover chemicals. In the process, they disposed of 20 liters of nearly pure sarin. Finally, Japanese police decided to carry out simultaneous raids on all cult facilities. The operation was scheduled for March 22, 1995. No one rushed it. Officers needed time to prepare, run drills, and secure enough gas masks. Informants quickly tipped Asahara off about the police plans, and he chose to strike first. If the police were coming, he would move before they did. That's how the plan of the Tokyo subway attack was born. Directly above the target area stood Japan's National Police Agency headquarters. The goal was simple: paralyze the police response and buy time to erase the evidence. On March 18, 1995, chemist Masami Tsuchiya, along with other cult scientists, was ordered to produce as much sarin as possible. They had just 2 days. That wasn't much. They were also missing key components to reach 70% purity. The best they could manage was a concentration of about 35%. Asahara was informed. He ordered the attack anyway. No delays, no adjustments. On the morning of March 20th, 5 members of Aum Shinrikyo entered the Tokyo subway system carrying 11 bags of sarin. They dropped them onto the train floors, punctured them with sharpened umbrella tips, and calmly walked out of the cars. Doctors didn't even realize it was sarin until 2 hours after the attacks began. Only then did they begin administering the antidote. By midday, the gas had poisoned more than 500 people. Those with mild symptoms recovered quickly and were discharged from hospitals. By the next day, most patients were back home, but 14 people died. The final victim passed away relatively recently in March 2020. For 25 years, that person had lived paralyzed. In total, around 6,000 people were affected by the Tokyo subway attack. If the sarin had been more pure, the outcome would have been far worse. Even diluted, what it did to the human body is hard to watch. Instead of distracting the police, the attack only sharpened their focus. Police launched massive raids on every cult property it could reach. They found everything: weapons, a laboratory, components for producing sarin, and a large Mi-17 helicopter. Asahara vanished, and the cult members, in whatever ways they could, tried to strike back. On March 30th, one sect member shot the head of Japan's National Police Agency outside his home in Tokyo. On the evening of May 5th, a burning paper bag was discovered in a restroom in the crowded Shinjuku station. Inside was a device filled with hydrogen cyanide. If it had activated, the poison would have spread through the ventilation system and killed thousands. Hideo Murai, head of Aum Shinrikyo's so-called Ministry of Science and one of the organizers of the attack, attempted to deny the accusations. He held a press conference outside the cult's Tokyo headquarters, surrounded by 100 journalists and cameras. Suddenly, a man lunged out of the crowd with a knife and stabbed Murai to death. It happened live in front of millions of viewers. The attacker was a member of the Yakuza. Maybe what the cult had done was too much even for organized crime. Or maybe Murai simply knew too much. Finally, on May 16th, police found the man in the center of it all, Shoko Asahara. He was hiding inside one of the cult's facilities. The room reeked of urine, and there he was. In one hand, he held a Kalashnikov rifle. In the other, a briefcase stuffed with cash. The trial began. Asahara faced dozens of murder charges. Now the killing of the lawyer, the attack on the judges, and the other unexplained crimes finally fit into one picture. In court, Asahara either remained silent or muttered under his breath. His lawyer tried to argue that he was mentally ill, but prosecutors refused to consider it. On February 27, 2004, the leader of Aum Shinrikyo was sentenced to death. For years, the execution kept getting postponed. Asahara spent more than 23 years behind bars. Over time, he deteriorated, wearing diapers due to incontinence, speaking in nonsensical words, living in unsanitary conditions. In 2018, Shoko Asahara was finally executed by hanging. 6 other senior cult leaders were executed as well. A 1998 survey titled, "Who Do the Japanese Trust?" was revealing. Churches and religious organizations ranked below the media and even below politicians. And yet, sects in Japan didn't disappear. Not even Aum Shinrikyo. It simply split into several branches. The main branch, called Aleph, still exists today. Its new leaders condemned the founder, apologizing for the attack, and paid compensation to victims. The Japanese government revoked the law that had once protected religious organizations, but the Aum branches themselves were not banned outright. It was easier to keep them in sight than to drive them underground. By the way, we have another video on this channel about Japanese groups that committed brutal acts, Unit 731, also known as the Japanese Death Camp. We don't recommend watching it while eating, but the link will be in the description below. Thank you again so much for watching. We appreciate all the support, the comments, the likes, the subscriptions. We are still a growing channel, so every little bit helps. If you want to get more involved, check us out on Patreon. This has been Yesterday. We'll see you next time.